Hello everybody, Calamity here, and this is your 20th time watching this video. You're stuck in the Samsara cycle. Today's video is going to be all about our favorite sleepy ninja, Sayu. She's a great healer, and she's great at applying swirls for your enemies, making her an excellent choice for the very distant Veneer set. We're going to go over everything you need to know about this character, from how to build her, to explaining her talents, to looking at her artifacts, weapon options, team options, constellations, and I'll be honest, Sayu is not really a character that you're going to be using into the late game. I mean, you can for things like Spiral Abyss and such, but she does struggle compared to other characters when it comes to late game content. However, she is S tier when it comes to exploration for various reasons, some of which we'll go into once we get to the talents. So we have a lot to cover, so let's get started. As I mentioned before, Sayu is primarily used as a healer and a debuffer thanks to Swirl and Viridescent Veneer. And let's talk about how her talents all work together and how she heals. So first we have the normal attack talent, which is called the Ninja Blade. This is a very standard normal attack talent. It's also, slow because it's a Claymore attack talent. And this isn't really something you're going to be using with Sayu. Unfortunately, this is not how she, even if you want to do a damage building Sayu, this isn't a talent you usually go for. It's mainly the elemental skill that you're looking for. So let's move on to that. Next up is the Yuhu Art Fuin Dash. This is what makes Sayu a very unique character compared to everyone else on the roster. So if you just press the elemental skill button, you'll do a basic roll forward and you'll do a kick, a whirlwind kick right after. It's really short. And it'll produce some particles. Now there's a different version where if you hold the elemental skill button, Sayu will continuously roll around. They call it the Fufu Windwheel state, but we'll just call it the rolling state for easier explanation. But you'll be able to roll around, and Sayu can absorb one element while she's rolling. And if there are a bunch of elements present, it does use the priority of elements, which if you aren't familiar, that is Pyro, Hydro, Electro, and then lastly Cryo. It cannot infuse with elements like Geo or Dendro. Also, the longer you are rolling around in the Windwheel state, then the longer the cooldown becomes. But depending on how you want to play her, this shouldn't be too much of a problem. If you are just using her for as a quick healer, then you won't be using the skill too much, although it's really fun to use, I should admit. I should mention, even though if you don't plan to use the rolling state as often, it's still better to use the hold version of the skill rather than the press, simply because the hold version gives you more particles for Sayu's burst uptime. So what you could do is just hold the elemental skill for a second, then let go to end it, and then you'll get extra particles compared to just pressing it. And then here it's explaining the elemental absorption. It does say Hydro, Pyro, Cryo, and Electro, but I believe this order is incorrect. It's just listing the elements that she can absorb, and she can of course, only absorb one element when she's rolling around, and she will deal additional elemental damage of that type as she rolls. Next up is her other Yuhu art, Mujina Flurry. This is a very straightforward elemental burst. She will first do AoE animo damage to nearby opponents, as well as heal everybody in the team simultaneously, and then she'll summon what's called the Muji Muji Daruma. This elemental burst is a bit, if you are familiar with Yaoyao's kit, you know how the bunnies throw the radishes and they'll either hit an opponent or they'll heal you. The Daruma is basically the same thing. It's either going to attack nearby enemies, but if it senses any character nearby that's below 70% HP, it will heal them instead. And this is primarily how Sayu heals. So if we look at the skill attributes here, we can see that her healing is scaled off her attack percentage. A percentage of her attack is what I should say. And not the usual HP percentage like other healers in the game. It does have a really expensive energy cost of 80, which is a bit unfortunate. It does mean we need to focus on some energy recharge for Sayu. And it does have a duration of 12 seconds, cooldown of 20, and we can see the damage that it does is very small. She is a healer primarily, so don't expect big damage numbers with her burst. Now let's move on to her Ascension talents, the first one being called Someone More Capable, and every time Sayu triggers a swirl reaction, she will heal your characters for 300 HP but an additional 1.2 HP for every point of elemental mastery she has. And this effect can be triggered once every 2 seconds. So as you're rolling around, you know, assuming you're at least swirling while you're rolling, every 2 seconds you're going to get a nice little heal, right? Depending on how much EM you have, it's going to be 300 plus, you know, and a reasonable amount of EM for a character like this would maybe be like 500, 600, more or less, depending on how you want to build her. And so you'll get, you know, some heals as you roll around as well. Next up, we have no work today. This is going to make it so that your elemental burst gets 2 of the following effects. It will heal nearby characters by 20% of the amount of HP. So this is more of a co-op thing. If you do decide to use Sayu in co-op gameplay, she'll heal multiple people with her burst. And the second effect being is that it will increase the AoE of its attack against opponents, meaning more swirls for more, you know, groups of enemies. This is an okay talent. And the last one is the Yuhu Art Silencer Secret. This is a very useful talent if you are trying to farm the crystal flies. If you're trying to get the crystal core so you can, you know, craft your condensed resin, this is really, really good. Just note that this will only work, like, if you're in a group of the crystal flies and you pick up one of them, the rest will start to act normally and start to fly away. So keep that in mind. It's not going to be permanently, you know, they're not going to permanently just stand still and not fly away once you get near like they normally do. You pick up one, any nearby crystal flies in the area will start to fly away. So just keep that in mind. But it does make it easier to position yourself better to grab as many crystal flies as you can. Also, she doesn't have to be the one on the field for this talent to activate, so she just has to be in the party. So if you're crystal core farming, a better character to use is someone taller like Zhongli or Kazuha, because they can reach higher. Sorry, Sayu. But the talent is still active, whether she's on the field or not. Next up is weapons. Now Sayu, again, as a healer slash support character, one of the best options you can give Sayu is, of course, the Favonius Greatsword. Really, really good weapon here. It gives her a ton of energy recharge. And it gives her the utility of being a battery for not just herself, but her team. Just make sure you build... You know, she doesn't need that much crit rate, but, you know, like 20-30% is a good amount because she does hit a lot. So really good option there. Another good option is going to be the Sacrificial Greatsword. Same reason as the Favonius Sword, just means you get to use your elemental skill twice. A better usage of using your elemental skill here is just to use the hold version, but for a short time. Because remember, you get more elemental particles from doing the hold version, so you hold for a second to start rolling and then immediately end it, and then you'll... Hopefully your weapon effect goes off, and then you'll have your elemental skill again. Then on the second time, you can feel free to use her elemental skill for much longer. The weapon that I gave my Sayu personally is the one you can craft in Inazuma. It has a really long name here, the Katsura Gikiri Nagamasa. This weapon, again, you craft it in Inazuma. You can get it to refinement 5 if you want. It's going to increase your skill damage by a bit. And it's going to generate... first you're going to lose energy, but then you'll regenerate more over time. And I thought this weapon was great for Sayu just because, again, it's going to increase your rolling damage. And then as you're rolling, you'll get your energy back more so. There are also damage-oriented weapons if you wanted to go that route for Sayu. For example, if you got the mailed flower from the event a while back, I know a lot of Sayu mains out there like to use this weapon. It's a really good weapon overall. It's going to give her a bunch of elemental mastery, as well as increase her attack as well, so that means more heals, more damage, and we like that a lot. And she's going to be doing elemental reactions all the time, right? So this is a very easy weapon for her to proc. Rain Slasher as well. If you want to get the benefit of this weapon's effect, you're going to have to pair her up with Hydra or Electro. It's going to give her a bunch of elemental mastery. And I don't have one, but if you have a Wolf's Gravestone, which is a 5-star Claymore, that is also going to be another utility buff for her team. And one of her best options, because it's a 5-star, gives her a bunch of attack and attack percentage, which increases her heals in this case. Moving on to artifacts, as I mentioned before, Sayu is one of the best holders of the Viridescent Veneer because she swirls a lot, just all the time, either with her skill or with her elemental burst. And as long as you're swirling anything, the element that she swirls with the enemy will lose 40% of resistance to it. So if you swirl with fire, they lose 40% fire resistance, which is a nice damage boost for your main DPS in this team. Now, if you don't want to go this route for whatever reason, you can go for a Noblesse Oblige, because again, your Sayu should be getting her burst all the time, and if you want to give your team a team-wide 20% attack buff, this option can be okay for that. Or for the damage-oriented people out there that want to go full damage for her rolls, we can use the brand new Golden Troop set. This set literally just increases your elemental skill damage by a ton. So if you really want to focus on Sayu's rolling damage, Golden Troop, brand new set in Fontaine, gonna be really fun for that. Now, lastly, for Sayu, you can do any sort of two-piece combination. So you can do two-piece like Emblem of Severed Fate for energy recharge. You can do two-piece Gilded Dreams for Elemental Mastery or Wanderer's Troop. Or you can give her Gladiator's Finale, Shimnawa's Reminiscence for two-piece attack percentage boost. So some sort of combination of those artifact sets are going to be okay early on. In the meantime, if you're deciding between giving her the Golden Troop or the Veridis Veneer, it's up to you. Alright, now that you've settled on an artifact set choice for Sayu, what are we looking for when it comes to the substats? And to be honest, it's a lot. You're going to want attack percentage, right? Because that's healing for Sayu. You're also going to want Elemental Mastery, which is also healing, but it's also damage. So it's also going to increase your swirling damage when you get Elemental Mastery. And last but not least, you're definitely going to want to get some energy recharge for Sayu, because again, her burst is her main source of healing. So you want that up as much as possible. And then lastly, just to fill out the blast slot, you can go for some crit rate or crit damage. Now, if you did decide to give Sayu the Favonius Sword, then crit rate does have a higher priority here, as you do want to proc that weapons effect as often as you can. Now, let's talk about the main stats for your Sands, Goblet, and the Circlet. Now, when it comes to these main stats, you have quite a lot of options. So for the Sands, I gave mine Elemental Mastery. That doesn't mean you have to. You have the choice of Elemental Mastery, attack percentage, or even energy recharge once again, but I only recommend it if you didn't give Sayu a energy recharge weapon like a Favonius Sword or a Sacrificial Greatsword, or the crafted one in Inazuma. So if you're struggling on energy recharge, the Sands is a great way to get a huge chunk of it and try to get, of course, the best substats that you can. This one unfortunately rolled, as you can see, a bunch of defense, so it's not the best. Next up is the Goblet, and once again, you can do the same thing here. Attack percentage is okay, Elemental Mastery is okay, or even Anemo damage bonus is going to be okay, but obviously the latter is really hard to obtain, especially with some good subsets, so just use the one that has the best subsets for you. Lastly, we have the Circlet, and again, you have a ton of options. So you can also go Elemental Mastery, of course. You can go attack percentage, or you can do what I did, which is to go for healing bonus. This is dependent on how you want to build your Sayu. If you want her just to be your healer, healing bonus. If you want to focus more on her damage, or some sort of hybrid mixture, right? Because increasing her attack will, of course, increase her damage, but because of how her healing scales, it will also increase your healing as well. So if you want a little bit of both, attack percentage. If you want to focus mainly on if you want to focus mainly on damage, Elemental Mastery. It's all dependent on what substats have the better value for your Sayu. Let's move on to Constellations, and actually, unlike a lot of other characters, the Constellations for Sayu are actually really good, and I do recommend getting at the very least her Constellation 1. And let's talk about what they do. So the first one is called Multitask no Jutsu. This allows her Elemental Burst to both simultaneously heal and attack at the same time. This is fantastic. C2 is called Egress Prep, and this is going to increase the damage of your elemental skill. It increases both the damage of the press version and the hold version. Now, as you can see on the second half here, the hold version gets a huge damage increase the longer you are rolling around. Up to 66 more damage to this method is possible. Really, really good. C3 and C5 are going to increase burst and skill respectively, which means more heals, more damage, which is great for Sayu. C4 is called skiving, new and improved. This is going to give Sayu 1.2 energy every time she does a swirl, and this effect will occur once every 2 seconds. This is a good constellation for Sayu, meaning that those energy requirements that you were, trying to get have gone much lower, which means more burst uptime. And lastly, Sleep O'Clock is going to be her C6. This is going to make it so that your elemental burst is also going to now benefit from your elemental mastery. Each point of elemental mastery is going to increase your Daruma's damage. Up to 400% attack damage can be gained via this method, and it's also going to increase its healing based off your elemental mastery as well, and you can get an additional 6,000 additional HP restored in this manner. Now this constellation is a game changer. So when we were discussing artifacts and I said, oh, if you want to focus on damage, EM, if you want to do a little bit of both, attack percentage, this makes it so that you can full on focus EM on your Sayu, therefore maximizing her damage as much as possible, and you won't lose out on healing anymore. It's going to improve your burst, which, as I mentioned before, her main source of healing, and it's even going to do more damage itself, which is really nice. So this is a really good constellation, big game changer for Sayu on how you want to build her. Next up, we have some team compositions for Sayu. Now, Sayu is a very not picky teammate. She can work with a lot of characters. One such team we have here is, well, I like to call it the Circle team, or if you want to call it Circle Impact, whatever you want to call it. This is Bennett, Zhongling, and Kea. All three of these characters have including Sayu, right, all have a burst that is in an AoE of a circle. And Sayu's job here is to either absorb Cryo or Pyro. She's more likely to absorb Pyro in this case. And she will be constantly proccing swirls as well as melts with your Zhongling burst and Kea's burst constantly hitting enemies. I find this to be the most free-to-play friendly team, and not to mention she does have synergy with Bennett. It might feel a little weird to put two healers like this, especially two strong healers together like this, but it actually ends up being beneficial for your team. So Bennett is going to give a huge attack buff, as I'm sure you all are familiar with the character by now, and this attack buff means more healing for Sayu. He gives like 1,000 attack while she's on his burst field, so big heals for Sayu herself, as well as of course a big damage increase as long as she's rolling in the Bennett burst as well. Zhongling here and Kea are pretty much doing the heavy lifting when it comes to damage, as they are the main source of it. They'll be melting each other's damage, which should result in big damage numbers. Alright, next up we have some more teams to showcase here. Now, I know this is starting to get a little fancy because I'm bringing in some 5 stars, but this is more of an example of what you could use with Sayu, not a requirement. What I mean by that is that Sayu is great with teammates that can do their damage off field. So Barbara has her, similar to Kea, right? She has a ring that applies Hydro. It doesn't do damage, but it will apply a lot of Hydro, which is good for elemental reactions. In this case, Electro Charged. I mean, I guess it does some damage, but it's very little. Yai Miko is a character that summons her Fox Totems that do a lot of damage off-field. And Sayu's roll works with Raiden Shogun's skill. So every time she's rolling and hitting enemies, Raiden Shogun's little slash elemental skill will be going off and doing lots of electro damage for you. So as long as Sayu is absorbing the Hydro element, which she should, you're going to be able to do lots of electro charge. If you did give her a rain slasher, she's going to do even more damage thanks to the weapons effect. So this is a team option you can definitely go for. Again, it doesn't have to be this exact team. If you don't have Yai Miko, you can tag in Official, or even Cookie Shinobu could be a different option as well. Again, not a specific team requirement, but also just showcasing team potential. So if you wanted to run, you wouldn't run a mono Animo team, first of all, but just to showcase a team here, you could use Sayu with someone like Heizo or even Faruzan. Faruzan buffs Animo damage by a lot. She'll reduce Animo resistance as well as increase Animo damage. Haizo here just to be your main DPS driver, and Yanfei to apply her shield if you have her at C4, or just to do pyro damage on her own. You could do something like this. I don't know how well this is going to work because, as you can see, my Farazan is not even close to being built. I am working on her, as well as several other characters, so this is just an idea if you wanted to use, you know, more animal characters together. Alright, lastly, we kind of have a different team here than you would normally see. Now, this is a team that I like to use for exploration. And honestly, I'll change maybe Nahida to a different character depending on what I'm doing. But for the most part here, we have Yelan because of her elemental skill, moving us really, really fast at the cost of no stamina. And once her skill is on cooldown, we can swap to Sayu, and then she does her rolling. We have Kazuha here because of his quick ability to climb, or like he's basically a free double jump with his elemental skill, because I also don't have Wanderer. But because we have 2 Animo on the team, we're also activating the Animo Resonance, which is going to decrease stamina consumption by 15%, increase your movement speed by 10%, and shorten your cooldown of your skill by 5%. This is really good for both Sayu and Yelan, so they can use their skills more often. And the movement speed does affect Sayu while she's rolling, so it means you'll actually be rolling a bit faster. And lastly, Nahida is just here because of her ability to harvest flowers and flowers from a long distance with her elemental skill, making it a lot easier. If I was doing a lot of hardcore mining and not so much flower farming, then I would replace Nahida with Zhongli. You don't have to do that because Sayu is a Claymore character, so she's great for mining if you need to get some ores. And again, as I mentioned earlier, Sayu is S tier when it comes to exploration. Very fast movement skill to help you get around faster. She can make crystal flies easier to catch thanks to her passive. And of course, the Claymore makes it so that she can mine minerals. Very, very versatile when it comes to exploration. Very, very helpful character in that regard. Okay, we're going to do a combat showcase for Sayu, although it's not really for Sayu in this case. We are doing an Aggravate Raiden Shogun team. And instead of Kazuha, we have brought Sayu in instead of him. And obviously this is going to be less than optimal, you know. Kazuha does give you a lot of extra damage, as well as the ability to group enemies. Sayu does not have the ability to group any enemies with her skill or burst. Something else that I should also mention is that my Sayu is not built for damage. She is primarily used as a healer, as you saw in my artifact section. If you want Sayu to be more of a damage dealer and you like the rolling build with a bunch of AoE damage around you, which I showed earlier, with the Zhonling, Kea, and Bennett, for example. You could also use other characters if you want. You know, if you wanted to focus more on that, then you would definitely give Sayu a more offensive weapon, so maybe even a 5-star weapon, or you get her the Golden Troop set. Mine doesn't have that. As well as give her lots and lots of elemental mastery, which I did not go for either. So my Sayu is missing a ton of potential damage. Not to mention, I also forgot to I don't have C5 or C6 either. So again, my Sayu is lacking lots and lots of damage potential. Definitely she could be doing a lot more than what I'm about to showcase. And one more character I forgot to mention is that she can actually work pretty well with Dia. While rolling around in Dia's field that she creates with her elemental skill, I believe it is, Sayu is able to proc it, and you're basically getting tons and tons of fiery explosions in Dia's field. So there is some synergy there. Something I haven't been able to try because I simply just don't have Dia. She hasn't shown up in my standard pulls yet, or my 50-50 losses yet. Hopefully I didn't just curse myself. Alright, enough talking. Let's get into the fight here and showcase how Sayu can keep the team alive.
やっこれこそが知恵の分だ。見てこい。行くぞ。裁きの雷。
夜の源源。
無礼者は必ず制された。
見切りました。ここより弱滅の時。せっやっ
無礼者下がる。
裁きの雷。ドドーン。知識をあなたにも。黒き翼よ。よっ逃げ道はありません。
I waste so much time when she teleports.
よっ手をつなぎま。
夜の源。
見てこい。裁きの雷。全部丸見えね。これこそが知恵の伝道。
Oh.
痛くしちゃう。逃げ道はありません。ここより弱滅の時。
無礼者下がる。
よっ鎖に断ち切る。分身の術。夜の権限。裁きの雷。私のお家にいらっしゃい。覚えたわよ。
のけ。
逃げ道はありません。黒き翼よ。知識はあなたにも。稲光。
Kinda close.
永遠なり。
Woo. That mode does not play around. Sorry I wasn't really talking there. But hopefully I was able to showcase that in really tough situations, Sayu is able to keep her team alive for the most part. I won't lie to you though, that was not a first try. I had to try several times. The enemies in this difficulty just hit really hard and are really tanky. And despite that, with having a little less than optimal team, because we don't have Kazuha here, you know, we still managed to pull it off barely. And again, just pointing out that my Sayu is not optimally built. Alright, and that's gonna be it for this guide for Sayu. Hopefully this was helpful. It looks like she's patting me on the head. Hopefully this is helpful to somebody out there. Again, just to reiterate, Sayu is not a character that I can really recommend for late game content like Spiral Abyss, but for exploration, I think she's one of the best characters for that. Again, I am not here to tell you that no, it's impossible, don't use Sayu in Spiral Abyss, it's never gonna happen. No, I'm not trying to say that, okay? You probably can, and as I stated earlier, there's a ton of ways I could have upped my Sayu's damage, but I am primarily using her as a support character. It's easier to build her that way, and if you want to build her as a damage dealer and you really like the rolling team with all the elemental damage numbers and such happening, you're more than welcome to do it. So I think Sayu is a great character for newer players to build, especially with a brand new continent to explore in Fontaine, and if you want a character that's going to make your life a little bit easier, Sayu is definitely worth the investment for that. And not to mention, Sayu is just an adorable character overall. And with that being said, that is going to be it for me in this guide. If you have any other additional questions for Sayu, or if you want to share your own tips for building her for newer players, feel free to leave a comment down below, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.